We are standing on the shoulders of giants.
These are extraordinary times, and we face an extraordinary challenge.
Manufacturing hardware has surpassed the software. And so we went to work, taking a first principles approach, questioning fundamentals, until after 3 long years, we introduced the world's first GPU accelerated geometry engine, a new architecture that gives you the power, freedom, and control to create next-generation applications that turn inspiration into progress. Progress that changes how we make things and where those things take us. Dyndrite, the future of additive manufacturing delivered.
Please welcome Harshil, Goel, CEO of Dyndrite Corporation.
Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us today. I know it's bright and early for some folks and extremely late for others, but I wanted to especially thank all the folks who've signed up and are kind of funneling in today. I'm Harshil. I'm the CEO of Dyndrite, and I'll be kind of your master of ceremonies for kind of all throughout today. And to kind of kick things off, I figured I might as well just kind of explain who's in the room, what's going on, and why this is kind of so important. So the room is currently made up of investors, startups, a variety of attendees, and press. And I think it's actually really important to say that there are over 50 to 70 venture investors in the room. There are a variety of startups, some who are you're going to hear pitch today, some who are here for the ride, and then a variety of attendees from aerospace, automotive, medical companies across the board, right? And I think this is important because it was described to me the other day that this is almost like a nightclub and we're the bouncers. And this is a really special event, right? The caliber of the folks in the room, far exceeds that of the average webinar and event. So I want to thank everyone for believing in us, trusting in us, and thank everyone for their time today. And so I think the first question that I'd like to answer is why, right? We saw a number of articles online asking, why on earth is Dyndrite doing this? And they're a startup, how could they possibly have the time to do this? And why is this important? So the why honestly breaks down into 3 key categories. We're doing this for the startups and the manufacturing ecosystem at large. We're doing this for the investor base. And of course, we're doing this for us. But truly, what is the purpose here and how is this meant to help? Well, on the startup side, I think it should be fairly clear and obvious, right? Something called COVID is happening right now. It's massively disrupting not only the businesses of folks currently, but it's also massively disrupting the financial process that most startups go through. And so kind of basically a few months ago, a bunch of startups came to us and honestly asked me for some advice, asked me for some intros, and asked me for some help with their decks on trying to figure out how can we possibly kind of cross this chasm. And because enough folks came to us, we kind of got the idea that maybe we should throw this investor day, get the kind of top folks that we can get in the industry and use it as an opportunity to give back, right? And so here, the startups are hoping to network. They're coming from a variety of geographies, not just Silicon Valley or New York or any of the key tech hubs. We have folks from Texas, Israel, Europe, kind of across the board, right? And so this was an opportunity to bring a truly global community kind of at bear. And quite honestly, this industry as a whole is honestly at the cusp. You're going to see a number of kind of reoccurring themes today in the panels and the pitches, namely, additive manufacturing, digital manufacturing as a whole has been here actually for quite some time. And it's only kind of very recently where sort of the marriage between all the technological innovation and the business innovation is actually starting to bear some fruit. And so because of that, we're on the cusp of the industry. And regardless of what Black Swan event is going on, right, people need to be aware of that and people need to acknowledge it. Because again, as you're going to see later today, honestly, the best companies are built when dire straits are happening. From the investor side, the goal is essentially education, right? So and quite honestly, to help folks understand and become more sophisticated about the space. Clearly, manufacturing has been in the news quite recently with, for example, HP or Origin or Carbon printing all types of PPE and swabs. A number of the startups also presenting today have done their part in this effort. But as a whole, what's on the news, what's on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox Business, and what's actually true, right? Like, how can we remove the hype cycle from this, and how can we help folks become more educated and sophisticated about the space? I mean, personally speaking, when I was raising my seed round in the Valley, right? I mean, I was honestly quite frustrated because here I am kind of in the thick of it, in the weeds of it, and there's sort of a lack of understanding of what's truly important here beyond actually the hype cycle. And so this was my way, and hopefully the whole ecosystem's way of trying to honestly educate folks, make them more sophisticated, and help them realize kind of what questions they should really be asking here and what's really important. The second reason I wanted to bring the investor base together was because this event serves as kind of like the one-stop shop way to just get the crash course in this industry, right? And with that, not only of course on the cool technology that's going to be happening here, but clearly some evolving business models, right? So we are evolving well past the original MakerBot, Gartner hype cycle, right? We're honestly past the trough of disillusionment, and we're now finally getting to a place where the things that matter are digitalization, automation, and production, right? And honestly, every single startup that you're going to hear today has some element of that in their pitch. And more so, some element of that actually makes its way into their go-to-market and into their business model. As well, I mean, of course, there's a lot of M&A activity happening here, and there's a lot of capital raises going on. PTC has been on a buying spree. Dassault, Siemens, and Autodesk have as well. And so clearly this space is hot. Clearly something is going on here. And like I said, I think we're on the kind of cusp of something. So on the Dyndrite side, of course, we benefit from this, but I think at this point, a number of folks may be asking, what even is Dyndrite and what's this all about? So the simplest way I can describe it is Dyndrite is a software company. We're based out in Seattle. We're backed by a number of well-known folks. And at the core, our technology is called a geometry kernel. So what is a geometry kernel? For those who don't know, a geometry kernel is essentially the part of software that does the mathematics in the background. Whether you're using software made by Dassault, PTC, Siemens, Autodesk, or otherwise, there's something core to all of their software suites that does basically all the hard math and geometry calculations in the background. And the reason why we made this company is because I had this realization a few years ago that we're actually at this unique point in time where the manufacturing hardware has actually surpassed the software. And even further so, even if I were to, for example, decided to build lattice generation software, it would not matter because none of the manufacturing devices could even consume that vast volume of data, right? Like at the same time, a major data explosion is happening in that all of the printers are becoming larger and larger in size. They're also, increasing in resolution, right? So this is a over cubic data problem. And beyond that, because everyone is focused on production, right? We need to crunch these numbers faster and faster and faster, right? And so to that end, that's why we, for example, partnered with NVIDIA, and there's a whole computing at the edge story, to be, brought to the front here, And then beyond that, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is actually kind of repeat the past. So for those who, you who remember, in the 1980s, there was a bane on the industry. It was called dot matrix printers. And through the sheer will of a few key folks, namely at Apple and Adobe, something called PostScript was created. PostScript is a way to translate document data, and geometry data and send it straight to a printing device. Firstly, the laser writer, and soon kind of adopted by the industry at large, for example, including HP. So PostScript was this key fundamental enabling technology that engendered the desktop printing revolution. And if you had to think of our kernel, you can think of it as in that same vein. Our goal is to basically become the PostScript of this industry, essentially become a foundation. And it's hilarious because, well, this event was also partially sponsored by HP, right? So clearly history is doomed to repeat itself. Beyond that, of course, once we kind of have a foothold in the manufacturing industry and honestly, hopefully become a backbone of this industry or an industry standard, right? The goal would be to then develop all kinds of software, whether it be through our partners and ISVs, or whether it be through our own gusto means. All right, so now sort of again why we Dyndrite are kind of at the heart of this. So given that our goal is to become an industry standard and foundation for the industry, right? The rising tide lifts all boats, right? And so we've been working, as I mentioned, with a number of startups and founders. It's actually one of the reasons why we created what we call the Dyndrite Developer Council. Sarah, if you can share your screen, that'd be helpful. So we initially created this Developer Council, A, to get a bunch of folks in the room, and B, to honestly evolve this into an industry standards body. So this council meets twice a year. The folks who attend are usually an SVP, VP, or C-level person from a software organization at one of these large companies. And the whole point is to discover, A, what are we not doing well? And B, what can we do to evolve and improve the industry? But of course, this collection is kind of the group of titans of the industry, or like the key folks that we believe are pushing the industry forward. And our goal was honestly to expand upon that. And so the way that we were going to expand upon that was by creating a broader developer program for a variety of folks, namely startups and other folks. And number two was to honestly launch this Elevate initiative. The idea is that we're not only elevating the initiative from a technology standpoint, but we're also actually elevating the industry from a socioeconomic standpoint and from an education standpoint. So, we've actually already pre-negotiated all of our kernel licensing deals to be honestly completely free for academia and institutions of learning. And beyond that, my goal was to give the software honestly completely for free to anyone who's even looking for a job in the space, right? We can't afford for this industry to become anemic, right? A serious amount of activation energy needs to be put in to honestly drive this industry forward and take this kind of to the next level. And of course, by throwing this event, it served as an awesome business development opportunity. We discovered a number of startups throughout this process who, it might make sense to partner with. But as a whole, I think everyone involved is going to benefit one way or another. So with that, I'll kind of give you a brief overview of the day, and then we'll get right to it, because I'm sure all of you are more interested in less hearing from me and more from the panelists and startups themselves. So the day is kind of broken up into two segments. The first is this panel. It's going to consist of a bunch of heavy hitters, kind of carefully curated and selected to kind of kick this thing off. And then right after the panel, we're going to bring on the startups, and it's going to basically follow a sequence. So I'm going to basically introduce the startups. We're going to see a brief 5-minute video, which definitely does not capture all of their worth, but was made concise so that you can consume it. And then there will be a brief Q&A after the video with the startup founders or folks from the startup, and then we'll move to the next. And so there are about 12 companies that we've selected, and we had to painfully select from, I think, over 20 to 30 plus applicants. And we'll go through all the startups back to back. I should also mention that the variety of startups needs to be acknowledged. We have folks from the seed round stage, Series A, B, and even C stage. We've fully kind of randomized them so that you can kind of just see, the different states of progress. We also don't have just software. We have software, we have hardware, we have metrology, and we have even, sensor data. So it's even kind of across the whole broad spectrum of things. So I hope you're all going to enjoy this event. We've put some serious time and effort into trying to genuinely help each of, the key categories here, namely the startups and the investors. As Sarah mentioned, please submit any and all questions over here. If you have any specifics, I'm sure you can mention them to Sean or Sarah who are in the Slack. And yeah, I hope you have a good event.